Hi, I'm Ivy. I was disowned by my parents at 15 because I refused to lie about what I believed. That sentence still feels unreal when I say it out loud. Not because it isn't true, but because for the longest time, I believed I deserved it. That maybe I really was broken. Too loud, too stubborn, too different. But the truth, I wasn't broken. I was just a girl born into a house that feared fire and couldn't handle a spark. I grew up in a quiet cul-de-sac in Fort Worth, Texas, a town where people waved from their porches, where church bells rang louder than sirens. Our house was the one with the perfect white shutters, the God Bless America flag, and the front yard that smelled like fresh-cut grass and lemon-scented fertilizer. From the outside, we looked like the kind of family that made holiday cards sparkle. Inside, it was a prison built from Sunday scripture, sealed with silence. My father, Pastor Gregory McAllister, was everything people in town respected. Tall, calm, commanding. He didn't raise his voice. He didn't need to. His presence was like a courtroom gavel, silent but final. My mother, Lorraine, was his echo. Everything about her was polished. Her nails, her casseroles, her smile at church potlucks. She believed in discipline, image, and white lace tablecloths. At church, people used to say, "You're so lucky to be raised in such a God-fearing home." Lucky. If only they knew that God-fearing didn't mean God-loving, and that the only thing I feared more than God was my father's silence when he was disappointed. In our house, questions were grenades. Disagreement was betrayal. And feelings? They were weaknesses to be prayed away. I wasn't allowed to cry too loudly, laugh too freely, or speak unless I had permission. When I was 7, I asked why girls weren't allowed to speak in the church choir like the boys. My mother pulled me aside in the kitchen and said, "Do you want people to think you're difficult, Ivy?" I didn't know what difficult meant at the time, but I knew I didn't want to be it. At 9, I started keeping a notebook under my mattress. It was where I wrote questions I couldn't say out loud. Why can't I be a scientist and still love God? Why does Dad's love feel like a reward, not a right? Why do I feel guilty when I'm not doing anything wrong? I filled 13 notebooks before I turned 14, all of them hidden, all of them sacred. My quiet rebellion, inked in silence. We had 3 commandments in our house, none of which were in the Bible. Don't embarrass the family. Don't question authority. Don't ever, ever make your father look weak. I lived by them like law, not because I agreed, but because survival depended on it. Then came middle school, and my world cracked. At 13, I joined the school's debate team. The first time I stepped on that stage, knees shaking, voice trembling, I spoke about environmental injustice in low-income neighborhoods. When the room clapped, something inside me stirred. It wasn't pride, it was relief. I had finally been heard, but with every small voice I found in school, my silence at home grew heavier. My opinions became dangerous, my insights disrespectful. When I started getting straight A's in science and asked about applying to STEM summer programs, my father said, "God didn't design women for laboratories. He designed them to build homes." My mother added, "Sweetheart, don't waste your cleverness on things that won't matter once you're married." I remember one night vividly. I was sitting at the dinner table, and the topic of gay marriage came up on the TV. I didn't say much. I just winced. That was enough. My father turned off the TV. The room fell silent. He stared at me like I'd cursed in church. "Do you believe that's acceptable?" he asked. I didn't answer, because I wasn't allowed to, because any answer would be wrong. I used to think families were supposed to be the one place where you could be fully yourself. Turns out, mine was the place I had to carve pieces of myself off just to fit in. On Sundays, I sat in church pews and watched my father preach about unconditional love, knowing full well that in our house, love had conditions. Say the right thing, look the right way, stay in line, and if you don't, you become invisible. Or worse, you become a threat. That's who I was at 15. A girl who had learned to stay small, speak softly, and never dream too loud. But that was about to change, because one day I stopped whispering and started asking a question that would unravel everything. What if the truth matters more than obedience? Have you ever had to shrink yourself just to be loved? If you've ever been afraid to speak your truth around the people who should protect you, type, "I see you, Ivy," in the comments, because maybe your voice is still waiting to be heard. It happened on a Wednesday. I remember the smell of chalk dust and old textbooks. I remember the hum of the overhead lights in room 204 and how the air always felt a little too cold, even in April. Mrs. Langston, our history teacher, had just assigned us a group project, something about constitutional rights. A boy in the back joked, "Guess Ivy's gonna talk about feminism again." The class laughed. I smiled. They weren't wrong. When it came time to speak, I stood up and did what I always did. I told the truth. I said women in the US still earn less than men. I said girls in our school were told to cover their shoulders while boys got to walk shirtless at track practice. I said silence was never the answer, because every movement that ever changed the world started with someone who refused to shut up. It wasn't loud. It wasn't dramatic. It was just my voice, calm and clear. But I didn't know, as I stood there, how quickly that voice would be ripped away. By nightfall, it had reached home. My mom was waiting at the kitchen table when I got back. Her hands were folded too tightly. Dad stood behind her, arms crossed, the kind of stillness that didn't mean peace. He slid his phone across the table. A video. Someone had recorded my speech. It was spreading through the church's parent group. My mother's voice was glass cracking. "Do you understand what you've done?" I opened my mouth to explain, but she raised her hand. Not to strike me, but to silence me. "You've embarrassed your father," she said. "You've embarrassed this family. And worst of all, you've questioned the word of God." I didn't cry. Not yet. That night, after dinner, my dad called a family meeting, which really meant he spoke, and I sat and listened, like a prisoner at sentencing. He placed a folded piece of paper on the table. Typed, "Formal." It looked like a contract. "You'll read this at Sunday service," he said. "You'll apologize for causing confusion among your peers. You'll reaffirm your commitment to your faith and your family. Then we move on." My fingers trembled as I picked it up. It wasn't just an apology. It was a confession, one I didn't believe in. It said I'd been led astray by secular influences. It said I regretted dishonoring my parents and my church. It said I repented for the pride in my heart. It said everything, except the truth. I looked up. "I can't read this," I whispered. His eyes didn't blink. "Then you don't live here anymore." Just like that. The next few minutes are a blur. My mom stuffed a few clothes into my old gym bag. No hugs, no tears, no, "We'll figure this out." Just a door closing behind me. I stood outside in the driveway, barefoot, holding a bag that weighed more than it should have. The porch light flicked off, like I was never there. I walked for blocks, not sure where I was going. I kept waiting for someone to call me back. No one did. By midnight, I was sitting on the curb behind the Walgreens on Main, trying not to shake. It was April, but the wind felt like January. That's when I realized I hadn't just been kicked out, I'd been erased. And the people who were supposed to love me most were the first to unlove me. If you've ever had your voice stolen by the people who claimed they were doing it out of love, if you've ever been told that obedience mattered more than truth, drop a comment in the comments and tell me, what was the moment you realized silence was survival until it wasn't anymore? When people talk about being kicked out, they imagine a slammed door, maybe a fight, a suitcase on the porch. But what they don't talk about is what happens the day after, when the silence sets in, when you realize your name isn't just missing from the dinner table. It's being stripped from every record you've ever touched. I crashed that night on the porch of an old classmate's aunt, Ms. Harlow. She let me sleep in the shed, out back, with an old cot and a space heater. No questions, just a thin smile and a locked door behind her. The next morning, I did what any 15-year-old would do. I grabbed my backpack, smoothed my hair in a cracked mirror, and walked to school like nothing happened. Except something had happened. The moment I stepped into the hallway, I could feel it. Eyes, whispers, not curiosity, confirmation. People weren't wondering, they knew. Third period, I got called to the office. Mr. Halbrook, the assistant principal, wouldn't meet my eyes. He said, "Ivy, your parents contacted us this morning. They've unenrolled you." I blinked. "They can't do that. I live in the district. I didn't do anything." He slid a folder across the desk. Inside, paperwork, signed, processed. It stated I was no longer under the care of Gregory and Lorraine McAllister, that I had left home due to behavioral issues, that I had exhibited signs of emotional instability and posed a risk to other students. I felt the floor tilt. "This isn't true," I said. Mr. Halbrook just nodded, soft and slow. "I know," but he didn't stop it. By lunchtime, my student ID had been deactivated. I couldn't get into the cafeteria. The bus driver told me my pass was invalid. The librarian asked me to leave because my privileges were suspended. By 3 p.m., I was nobody. And worse, everyone seemed okay with that. That weekend, I overheard Ms. Harlow on the phone, whispering, "She's here, yes, but only for a few days. Lorraine says she's troubled, stole from them. God help her soul." I stood in the hallway, fists clenched. There it was again. Not just rejection, reputation destruction. My parents weren't just done with me. They were making sure no one else would touch me either. By Monday, I couldn't find a single classmate who'd look me in the eye. Even Rosa, my best friend since second grade, avoided me in the hallway. I messaged her. No reply. Later that night, I saw a Facebook group called "When Ivy Snapped." It had photos of me with fake captions: "Unstable, violent, watch your back." People I'd known since elementary school were tagging each other in the comments, laughing like it was a joke, as if I was a TV character going off the rails. Not a girl sleeping in a shed with no family, no school, no plan. I tried applying to new schools, but every time I wrote my name, Ivy McAllister, something stopped. Paperwork vanished. Applications were lost. Emails unanswered. It was like someone was pulling strings behind the scenes, cutting every rope I tried to grab. And deep down, I knew who. My parents hadn't just kicked me out. They had erased me, digitally, legally, socially, spiritually. And the worst part? They did it smiling, waving at neighbors, preaching on Sundays about forgiveness, while dragging my name through every backdoor channel they could reach. So I stopped trying to prove myself. I stopped explaining. Because what do you do when the people who gave you life decide you don't deserve to exist? You either disappear, or you rise so far that they can't rewrite you again. And I wasn't ready to disappear. If you've ever had someone try to erase your story while they tell the world theirs, if you've ever been betrayed, not with fists, but with whispers, drop a comment in the comments and tell me, what did they say about you? And what truth are you ready to speak now? Kindness feels different when you're starving for it. I met Ms. Janice Holloway 3 days after my parents erased me. She was a distant friend of my mother's from church. Warm smile, soft perfume, always called everyone honey. She found me sitting outside the Dollar General with a busted phone and a granola bar that had expired a year ago. "Lord have mercy," she gasped, kneeling beside me. "You poor thing, what happened to you?" I hesitated, but I was tired of lying, so I told her the truth. And for the first time in days, someone didn't flinch. Ms. Janice brought me home that night. Her house smelled like cinnamon and something floral. She showed me the guest room, handed me clean clothes, and said, "No pressure, baby. Stay as long as you need. God sends us who we're meant to help." I cried in her arms, because in that moment, I thought maybe, just maybe, I had found a second chance. For a while, it was peaceful. I cleaned up around the house, helped her sort books in the garage, cooked breakfast when I could. In return, she gave me quiet, safety, a place to breathe. She even took me to the local library, and let me use her card to check out books. I started reading everything I could on coding, online education, mobile learning platforms. I didn't know why yet, just that I needed something that didn't rely on other people to survive. But things changed the day she invited over some church friends. They asked questions with tilted heads and syrupy voices. Isn't she the McAllister girl? I heard she's been unstable. It's so noble of you to take her in, Janice. I smiled through it. But that night, I overheard Ms. Janice on the phone. They just gave, bless their hearts. I didn't ask for a dime, but people want to help when they hear stories like hers. Stories like mine. 2 days later, she handed me a stack of pamphlets. Freedom from Rebellion, Returning to Obedience. It was a rehabilitation retreat for wayward teens. She said her church would cover the costs, said it would reset me. I told her no. Her smile faded. After everything I've done for you, she snapped. I should have known what kind of girl you really are. That night, I packed my things quietly. I left her house at midnight with no money, no plan, and a heart that felt twice as heavy as the bag on my back. I slept behind a laundromat for 3 nights, used their bathroom to wash my face when the owner wasn't looking. I ate crackers from the vending machine, rationed like gold. Then came Brent. He was maybe 30, wore an army jacket, said he'd seen me walking around and wanted to help. He bought me lunch, listened to me talk about my parents, about Ms. Janice, about wanting to build something, anything, that could give other kids like me a way out. He said he had a friend who ran a youth startup, said he could get me in, but there were fees, paperwork, placement tests, said if I could scrape together a few $100s, he could open the door. It sounded too good to be true, but I wanted so badly to believe in something good again. So I gave him everything I had, every tip, every dime, every scrap I'd saved from odd jobs and leftover change. He promised to meet me at the diner on 8th Street the next morning. I waited 5 hours. He never showed. His phone was off. His social media, gone. That night, I sat on a bench outside the bus station, hands shaking, vision blurry. Not because of hunger, not even heartbreak, but because I realized something far worse. My parents didn't just abandon me. They'd taught the world how to spot my vulnerability and feed on it. If you've ever mistaken survival crumbs for love, if you've ever thanked someone for holding you right before they let go, drop a comment and tell me, what was the moment you stopped trusting the smile and started listening to your gut? Because trust, it's not just broken, it's trained out of you until you have no idea who's safe anymore. It just becomes background noise, like a low hum behind everything you do. That's where I lived after Brent disappeared with my money. No rage, no breakdown, just numb, heavy, silent. I spent the next few weeks slipping in and out of places that didn't ask questions. Back alleys, shelter kitchens, old couch cushions, at the homes of people who could only help for a few days. The truth, no one really wants a 15-year-old ghost on their living room floor. Eventually, I stopped asking for beds. Instead, I found a 24-hour laundromat on the east side. No one really noticed me there. If I kept folding towels for customers, the owner, Mr. Rami, an old man with tired eyes, let me crash in the supply room. No blanket, just cardboard and detergent fumes. But for the first time, I had something close to stability and Wi-Fi. One night, I found an old Chromebook in the recycling bin behind a thrift store. The screen was cracked, keys were sticky, but it worked. So did I. I scrubbed the floors and folded jeans during the day. At night, I taught myself HTML, Python, UX design. I didn't even know what I was building, only that if I didn't create something, I'd disappear entirely. I stopped thinking about being rescued. No one was coming. So I built my own ladder, one Google search at a time. Some nights, I still heard the voices in my head. My father saying, "You were made to obey, not to invent." My mother whispering, "You'll come crawling back when the world chews you up." But each line of code I wrote felt like a middle finger to all of it. I didn't have money, or family, or a name anyone respected, but I had a mind that wouldn't quit. And that was the start. One night, around 2 a.m., I stumbled on a university forum. Someone had posted a thread titled, "Pitch your idea, no judgment, no degree needed." I froze. I wrote something, deleted it, wrote again. Finally, I posted a comment. What if there was a way for kids like me, kids who've been kicked out, erased, ignored, to keep learning? No money, no paperwork, just a phone and a will to survive. What if school didn't live in buildings that rejected us, but in the cloud, where no one could kick us out again? I didn't expect a reply, but I got one, then another, then 20. One was from Dr. Karen Wolf, a professor from the University of Chicago. She said, "Ivy, if this is real, you don't need a high school diploma to matter. You need a prototype." I stayed up for 4 straight nights, building one. No sleep, no backup plan, just me, a cracked Chromebook, and everything I had left to prove. When I sent it in, I didn't attach a resume. I sent my story, raw, ugly, true. And for the first time in my life, truth didn't cost me anything. It opened a door. I got a scholarship, private, quiet, designed for exceptional cases. I was 16, no home, no documents, no past, but I had a future, and I was done asking permission to walk toward it. If you've ever had to rebuild yourself from the floor up, if you've ever created your own future from scraps and silence, drop a comment in the comments and tell me, what was the first step you took when no one believed in you but you? Because sometimes survival isn't loud, it's just consistent. And sometimes that's enough to change everything. I never meant to start a revolution. I just wanted a way to survive. But sometimes survival is revolutionary. By the time I was 19, I was sleeping in a shared basement apartment in Chicago, eating ramen and working 2 part-time jobs while studying online. I had no last name worth anything, no graduation photos, no safety net. But I had a question that wouldn't leave me alone. What if no kid ever had to beg to learn again? What if school didn't belong to institutions with locked doors and paper trails? What if education, real, flexible, accessible, was built for the kids who'd been erased like me? That question became a sketch. The sketch became a demo. The demo became a platform. And I called it Endura, not after me, but after the word endure, because that's what we do when the world forgets us. We endure until we can rebuild something no one can take away. The first version was clunky. I launched it from the corner table of a library with 3 cracked iPads and a Google form. But within a month, over 300 students, runaways, shelter kids, system survivors, had logged in. They didn't care that it wasn't perfect. They just needed a place where no one asked for their parents' email, where no one questioned their worth, where they could finally say, "I'm still here." At 21, I pitched Endura at a tech accelerator. I wore a thrift store blazer and shook hands with men who thought I was an intern. They called me kid. They said I was too soft-spoken, too young, too female. But I'd been underestimated before. It's where I learned how to make people listen. That year, we got our first funding round. Not a lot, but enough. I moved fast, built a team, survivors, coders, kids who'd aged out of foster care. We weren't just building an app, we were building a rebellion. And the world started noticing. By 25, Endura had spread to shelters across the country. We partnered with advocacy groups, public libraries, halfway houses. Then came the headlines. Homeless teen turned CEO redefines education. The platform that doesn't care where you came from. Endura, school for the unseen. They wanted to talk about the tech. But I knew it wasn't about tech. It was about belonging. I was invited to speak at a conference in DC. Half the room was in suits, the other half in disbelief. I stood at that podium and told them, I built Endura so no kid ever has to feel disposable again. Not because I'm brilliant, but because no one else did it when I needed it. The room went quiet, not applause, not fanfare, just the kind of silence that feels like something shifting. And then the call came. The White House. They wanted to feature Adura in a national education initiative. The girl who slept in laundromats was now being flown in by the Department of Education. Me, Ivy McAllister, the girl my parents said would come crawling back. The girl they tried to delete. But you know what's wild? Before I even packed my bags, my parents got there first. They told the press they'd supported me all along, that I was a product of a strong foundation and faith. They posted pictures of me as a child on Facebook, old family photos, hashtags like #ProudParentsPound. They called reporters before I could, tried to rewrite the story. I nearly died surviving. If you've ever built something they swore you couldn't, if you've ever watched The People Who Broke, you try to take credit for your healing. Drop a comment in the comments and tell me, what did they say you'd never do? And what did you do anyway? Because sometimes the loudest voice isn't the one that hurt you. It's the one you found when you stopped needing their permission to speak. I should have seen it coming. The moment Adura hit national headlines, the moment I was invited to speak at the White House, they came back. Not with an apology, not with a whisper of remorse, but with smiles, cameras, and carefully crafted sound bites. The first was a Facebook post, a photo of me at 5, holding a Bible on Easter Sunday. My mother's caption read, "We raised her in faith and love. She may have taken a difficult path, but a parent's love never fades. God is good. Our daughter, our pride." I stared at it for a long time, not because it hurt, but because it was so clean, polished, perfect, sanitized of the truth. There was no mention of the night they kicked me out, no mention of the lies they spread, no mention of the years I spent sleeping in silence while they preached on Sundays about grace. Then came the email, subject, urgent, regarding Adura. It wasn't from them, it was from their lawyer. Attached, a formal request for a legacy inclusion agreement. They claimed that because I was a minor when I built Adura's original concept under the structure and influence of their home, they were entitled to 15% of the company's equity public recognition as co-founders. A seat on the board. I laughed. I hadn't laughed like that in years, because this wasn't just greed. This was a last-ditch power grab from people who'd lost control of the narrative. I didn't respond right away. Instead, I flew to Fort Worth, not because I missed it, not because I wanted peace, because I needed to look them in the eyes and make it final. We met at a restaurant they chose, some shiny brunch place, with gospel music playing softly in the background. My father wore the same suit he'd preached in for years. My mother had pearls on. They stood when I walked in, like strangers meeting a business partner. "Look at you," my mother said. "So successful. We always knew you'd do something special." I sat down. They smiled like nothing had ever happened. No mention of the shed, the silence, the smearing, just empty praise and small talk. Halfway through the coffee, my dad cleared his throat. "We just want to be a part of what you've built. That's all. We gave you life, Ivy. We provided the foundation. Surely that counts for something." I leaned back. "You gave me life," I said. "And then you took everything from it." He didn't blink. My mother reached into her purse and pulled out another document, this one with a pre-written press release. "We can announce the reunion before the White House appearance," she said. "It'll show unity, redemption. People love that." I looked at the paper, then back at them. "You're not coming to D.C., I said. My father's jaw tightened. "You wouldn't be there if not for us." And that's when I said it. "You're right. I wouldn't be there, because if you hadn't thrown me out, I never would have fought to survive. If you hadn't erased me, I never would have had to rebuild. So yes, you helped make me, but not in the way you think." I stood, left the press release on the table. My mother called after me, "Ivy, don't be ungrateful. This is your family." I turned at the door. "Family doesn't burn your name and try to sell the ashes." Then I walked out. That was the last time I saw them in person. But it wasn't the last time they tried. Because the next week, a news story broke. Parents of CEO Ivy McAllister face foreclosure, say daughter abandoned them despite her success. Photos of their house, my childhood bedroom, a picture of them on the porch, looking tearful and holy, and my inbox, full of messages from people who hadn't spoken to me in years. They raised you. Family is family. They just want help. Help, as if they hadn't already taken everything they could. As if survival was selfish. If you've ever had to look the people who hurt you in the face while they rewrote your story into theirs. If you've ever been called ungrateful for protecting yourself, drop a comment in the comments and tell me. When did you realize that boundaries don't make you cruel? They make you free. Because the moment you stop begging to be understood is the moment you start becoming untouchable. The morning I stepped into the White House, I didn't feel proud. I didn't feel powerful. I felt still, like the chaos behind me had finally gone quiet. I stood in front of a wall of flags, surrounded by cameras, reporters, and people I once thought were untouchable. They handed me a microphone and said, "You have 5 minutes. Make it count." I wasn't nervous, because I wasn't here to impress anyone. I was here to speak for the version of me that once sat in the back of a laundromat with cracked hands and a broken Chromebook. I took a breath, and I began. My name is Ivy McAllister. At 15, I was erased, not just from my home, but from schools, records, and the community I was raised in. All because I refused to lie about what I believed. I paused. The room held its breath. I wasn't perfect. I didn't always know what I was doing. But I knew that learning shouldn't require a last name, a clean past, or a two-parent household. So I built a Dura, not to prove anyone wrong, but to make sure no kid like me ever had to beg for a second chance. There were tears in the crowd, but I didn't cry. I was done bleeding for applause. My parents are not here today. They've made their version of this story clear. They say I forgot where I came from. But I didn't forget. I survived it. And I came here today not to ask for approval, but to stand in full view of the world and say, I do not owe you this name. I earned it. When I stepped off the stage, I didn't look for their faces. I looked for the girl who never got to speak, the one I left behind. And I promised her, we are done being quiet. The media tried to spin it. Some called me brave. Some called me bitter. But I didn't care anymore because I wasn't fighting to be understood. I was fighting to be free. The next morning, I woke up to thousands of messages. Kids from shelters, single moms, teachers, runaways, survivors, all of them saying the same thing. You spoke the words I never could. And that's when I knew I hadn't just reclaimed my story. I'd made room for others to begin theirs. If you've ever had to become everything they said you couldn't, if you've ever had to climb out of silence brick by brick and still be told you're ungrateful for surviving, this story is for you. Drop a comment and tell me, what part of yourself did you have to fight to keep? What truth did you hide just to stay safe? Because this space, right here, isn't just about my voice anymore. It's about yours too. And I promise you this, they don't get the final word. You do. If this story resonated with you, don't just keep it to yourself. Hit that like button, subscribe for more powerful stories, and let me know your thoughts in the comments. Your voice matters, and I read every single one. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.